Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I am Dr. Andrew Scans. He is Dr. Michael Werman, Esquire. On today's show, we'll be recapping the NFL's Week 16 action, talking about our Kansas City Chiefs quite a bit in this show. We'll also talk a little bit about the college football playoff. It's now its first weekend is in the books, and we'll give a little preview for the next round of bowl games. Uh, in the football playoff. Uh, but we'll kick off today's show with the Kansas City Chiefs once again. Now we're recording this a little bit late, so we've already seen the Week 17 matchup. So now at this point, we know the Chiefs are the one seed.
Yes.
And they're probably playing their best football of the season, Mike. And now we've been talking for weeks about how we're not terribly confident about the team. Has that officially changed now? Are you feeling better about the team now at only one loss secured the bye and don't really have to play the last game now? Are you finally confident in this team? Are we on the right track?
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. I still maybe am a little, I guess this, but it's no different from every other year where you're just worried about the playoffs because it's only because one loss can doom you or will doom you in the playoffs. So
Yes.
I feel as good about the Chiefs now, maybe as I have since like week 1 or 2 when I still thought the Chiefs, were going to, blow people out and just maybe we're starting a little bit slow rather than just, playing every game like it's the Super Bowl, and there's the team that they're playing is Super Bowl caliber, and every game is close. But now the Chiefs are starting to pull away from teams. I think they did that first against Cleveland. The offense wasn't so great against Cleveland, but Cleveland has a good defense. But it also, I think the problem was on the line where Joe Tooney had yet to scoot out to left tackle, and they put Caliendo, not Frank Caliendo, but Mike Caliendo, in at left guard, and that really has, I think, solidified the offensive line because I think Tooney can. Maybe they're not quite as good at guard as they were with Caliendo there instead of Tooney, but they're much better at tackle than they had been with either Suamataia or Wanye Morris, the left tackle. Maybe DJ Humphries will make his comeback and make it better, but
At
but
least
right
provide
now,
maybe some option at least, right?
yeah, yeah, right now you think though that maybe he's keeping the line the way it is the best strategy. I think Mahomes has been sacked a lot less the last couple of weeks than he was um, previously, so
Yeah.
he's had more time. He's been uh, I guess we shouldn't talk about the game specifics of the game against Pittsburgh in this segment. We'll talk about the Texans game, but he's been throwing touchdown passes and no interceptions. He's had more time in the pocket. He's also been pretty mobile with that ankle sprain that we were worried a little bit about too. So
Right.
um, yeah, and the ends up the Texans game was one of those games where it also ended up being another one score game, but it was a one score game largely because of the Andy Reid gentlemanly home stretch where Kareem Hunt probably had a touchdown he could have gotten, or at least gotten the Chiefs into easy field goal range, or they could if they wanted to they could have added more points to that score, but they
Yes.
only won by 8. But that's because they wanted to, take the clock all the way down to 0 while they had the ball. So
Yeah.
it wasn't one of the last second one score games that they have been having. So it seems, that wasn't. So it seems like there's been, games that have been pretty where you've been able to breathe at the end of the game rather than being all tense. So that's been good. How are you? So I guess I am kind of back on the uh I don't know if it's a band if I'm on the bandwagon per se since I've been supporting the Chiefs the whole time. But
Yes.
what do you how is your confidence with the Chiefs right now?
Well, I mean, it also seems like they've changed their offensive game plan a little bit too. They're doing a lot quicker throws like early in drives too. So it's like it seems like that has to help them like get into more of a rhythm and kind of the quick passing to like Worthy, like let him just get outside and see what he can do on the wings, stuff like that. More and more screen passes to running backs even too, which is something they hadn't really done a whole lot this season. But yeah, P Ryan on third down's been pretty great. Having some really big plays the last couple
Yeah.
weeks. So that seems to have been like made a big difference in the offense. And some of the drives haven't stalled quite as often, at least anyway,
Mhm.
as we were seeing earlier in the season. So I think some of these changes actually are finally being like, helping to protect Mahomes more, and that seems to be, you
Yeah.
know, pretty helpful. So yeah, I'm a lot more confident in the team than I was at any point I think earlier in the season. So uh, this is pretty good. But yeah,
Yeah.
how much of this do you think would you now having seen this for the last like basically 2 seasons of seeing like the same stuff, the same close games like iffy situations. This year they've seemingly come out on top in like basically every
Mhm.
toss up sort of scenario. Where last season they were not coming up on top every time. How much of this do you put on our on Nagy? Because that's like the 2 seasons he's been back in town. Is that do you think this is more related to him than anything else, or is it
The close
is
games,
it
not.
more with the offensive line issues that's causing some of these
Yeah, I
things?
wonder. You wonder how much of the offense is Nagy, how much is Reed, how much was Bieniemy, how much was Reed.
Yeah.
Um, I if you talk about the close games, one thing I might be a little more worried about the Chiefs in close games going forward is still the lingering injury to Harrison Butker, who missed an easy field goal in Cleveland. Was it Cleveland? And then I think has looked a little shaky on things. We won't talk about Pittsburgh yet, but maybe we will. He did miss a long extra point in Pittsburgh, but that was a
Yes.
48-yard extra point. Um,
Yeah.
but so I'm not quite as confident in Butker. Maybe another week or two will get me there. Well,
Yeah.
he'll be okay because of his knee. But yeah, back to Nagy. Yeah, it's hard to say, why the Chiefs are playing better. If anything, it seems a little bit like they have Worthy playing more of the Rasheed Rice role, where Rice was always getting short passes and running with
Mm,
it, and now that's what Worthy is usually doing, rather than trying to, go up for the deep ball. If anything, the deep ball has been going to Justin Watson more.
yeah.
Um,
Especially in this game that we're not quite ready to talk about yet.
yeah, yeah. Uh, keep alluding to it, but it hasn't
Yes.
happened yet, at least in this scenario. Um,
Right.
But yeah, it seems like Worthy's been easing he's been more on the same page as Mahomes lately.
Mm,
And I think probably just having Hopkins there maybe is just a calming presence, or a just no there's a big third down, he can get they can get him the ball. Um
yeah.
Kelsey has been playing better lately as well, I think. Um it just yeah, the offense has just looked a lot better. It seems like maybe it even Kareem Hunt should probably be running the ball more than Pacheco, because I think Pacheco maybe he's not quite what he was um, pre-injury. So, again, he broke his leg, so it's probably taking a little while for him to get back to his
Yeah.
old self. But Hunt looks a little bit like in short yardage situations. Hunt is the guy. He seems to be converting more than Pacheco, and I think maybe going with him on those and P Ryan a little more, resting Pacheco a little bit is maybe the best strategy here.
Yeah. So
What
would you actually look at trying to bring the enemy back in some
as a
capacity
consultant? Well, he
before
has.
before the playoffs?
I would say they probably have talked to him. I don't know how much they will or won't. I'm sh I I think having another guy around is that won't hurt. That's for
Yeah.
sure. It's not. I don't think it's a too many cooks will spoil the broth situation with
Yeah.
Reed around, because they did have Reed and Nagy both 2 years ago, when after Nagy had left Chicago, he was the quarterback coach again.
Yeah.
Uh, and but yeah, but I think a lot of it is Mahomes has settled in the last few games more. He's he hasn't been throwing he hasn't been maybe throwing the interceptions that he did earlier in the season. Um, I think the receivers have been better, and the defense has been strong as well, at least strong enough. I think they had a stretch there where I think they were trying to figure out who that second cornerback was, and it seems like it's been a little bit better um, with Joshua Williams playing in the absence now of Jalen Watson for the last 10 weeks or whatever it was when he went down. So um,
Is there any chance of Watson coming back before the end of the season, or
I
is
don't
that a for
think so.
sure season ending thing? I didn't I don't recall how they like talked about that, I guess.
It says he's not expected to return this season.
Yeah,
At least a month ago he wasn't. Um, I think he broke his ankle, didn't he?
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right.
Maybe fibula and tibia both or something. I'm not sure.
That shouldn't he should not come back this year.
Yeah,
Even if he like was cleared, you would consider him not
yeah, broken fibula and tibia.
wanting to
So
come back. Yeah.
both. Yeah, that's a tough.
Yeah.
But I think also they figured out the rotation a little bit better. I think in some ways Hicks is playing more now, and Connor maybe is playing a little less because he's been kind of in a slump.
Yeah.
And McDuffie has been playing better in the secondary too. He had you against the Texans he had his second consecutive game with an interception. Uh, his first two interceptions of his career actually were those two games. So I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's been, and it seems like the problems of the linebacker problems maybe are better. Like it's not like the tight ends are just running rampant anymore um, against the
Yeah.
Chiefs. So it seemed like yeah, that was happening a lot, but in the last couple of weeks it's been toned down quite a bit. So yeah, so yeah, so what do you think of the Chiefs play defensively? Does Spagnuolo still have what it takes to dial up, blitzes at the right time to confound his offensive opponents?
Well, and that seems to be, I think, is probably helping out the corners a lot too, is they have gotten a lot more pressure on the quarterbacks in the last couple of games, and having a Minihue back probably
Yeah,
has made at least some difference,
yeah.
and they seem to be getting back in again. Not to quite talk about it quite yet, but even in the absence of Chris Jones, they were getting pressure in
Mhm.
the Week 17 matchup against Pittsburgh. So those are, think good signs at least anyway for the Chiefs. Um, that they don't have to have all of their personnel present to to be able to affect the game like on the defense. So like, minimizing the amount of time the quarterback has certainly helps all the DBs out.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, too. So like, and it has seemed to have led to a lot more turnovers in the last couple of weeks where, Chiefs were not forcing any turnovers basically through the first, you know, 14 weeks this season, and now the tap is open. I think at this point.
Yeah, the turnover, it's one of those things. Turnover luck is just what it is. I think luck in a lot of ways, but now it seems like it's bounced back, at least in favor of the Chiefs, or at least it's
Yeah,
um, so like the Chiefs. I think now are I'm going to look up the turnover differential. Um, so right now, this is after 16 games. The Chiefs are actually +6 in the turnover differential.
the
Um,
last three games they're something like
yeah, well,
plus 10 or something, aren't they?
yeah, at the Cleveland game
Yeah,
alone, they were +6, so they've been even
yeah,
outside of that. But outside the last couple of games before that, they were down too. So they've won the turnover battle, but the Bills and the Steelers were the highest at 20 and 15, then the Packers, then the Texans, and then some other teams. But the Chiefs were kind of in the middle to lower end most of the season.
yeah,
And they were still winning games. So it, I
right.
think, I think that
Even
bodes
losing
well
turnover battle.
that even if they don't get the turnovers, they can still win the game. And a
Yeah,
lot of these teams, like, we aren't supposed to talk about Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh, I think, needs to win the turnover battle to win games. And when they
yeah,
don't, they lose. And I think that happened against Baltimore, especially, and it also will foreshadowed happened against the Chiefs as well. But um, yeah, the Chiefs have been much better. Do you want should we segue into our bets since we were talking so much about the Chiefs? I actually bet at the very perfect time. I bet on the Chiefs. I think because this was when Mahomes was still iffy whether he was going to play or not, and if he was going to play, how healthy was he going to be? So the Chiefs
Yes.
were actually for a short period 2.5 point underdogs against Houston. I think by the time the lines closed right before game time, maybe it was the Chiefs were at least 2.5 point favorites.
Yeah,
Um,
completely flipped. They were 3-point favorites at the time
3 point
our
favorite. Three,
that the bets closed on our for our big board.
yeah, so they were 3 point favorites. So
So
um,
5.5 point swing from like the Thursday that we picked the game to
yeah,
uh,
yes,
until Saturday when the game actually happened, or Tuesday I guess when we picked
Tuesday
the
to
game.
Saturday, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so it was
last
a big switch, and yeah, and Chiefs. The Chiefs, I think the game was fairly close in parts, but the Chiefs, like we mentioned, they could have won by 10 to 14 points, and they won by yeah, I guess 11 to 14 points, 11 to 15 points. They just kicked a extra point for the touchdown. But um, yeah, I think that yeah, they looked very good. And Mahomes, I think, especially on that big touchdown run he had early in the game, where he ran about 15 yards probably out, and he kind of used his shoulder at the end to get into the end zone, a little bit like he did in the playoffs a couple of times. Um, it yeah he that really I think showed that he was not as hurt maybe as we had feared. Uh,
Well, that play didn't look great at the beginning because he did stumble pretty heavily moving forward, and then regained his balance and still managed to cover enough ground
that's
to
true.
get
Yeah,
to the end zone easily, at least anyway. So at the very beginning, it didn't look so great, but then it looked fine. So that's actually kind of a microcosm of his like whole week, really,
yeah,
right? Of on that one play. Although he had been scrambling earlier in the game and looked pretty decent in those situations,
yeah,
but that run was pretty nice, and he was able to take a hit there and deliver a hit actually, which is a little better than taking the hit. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So he won. So he was.
he's
Uh,
pretty good at football, Mike.
he is. He is. I think he's been back. And he's one of those guys we've been talking about. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as the 1-2 for the MVP. You sort of think, well, maybe it's, I don't, Mahomes. He might have the stats. Although he's catching up, I think, in the stats department in the last few weeks as he's limited the interceptions and been getting quite a few touchdowns. Um,
Yeah.
he's maybe somebody that I don't think he's going to win, but he's probably sneaked into the at least top five again. Uh, maybe you have Saquon and Sam Darnold maybe ahead of him. I don't know. Probably just because Darnold's been so surprising
Yeah.
uh, this year.
Well, you tend to look at teams that have extremely good winning records,
Yeah. Although you
and
might put Mahomes
then you have
ahead
to
of
try to pick a guy from those teams is usually what they're looking for.
yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to not look at a team that's only had one loss on the whole season. And
Mhm.
I mean, who else would you talk about on the team as being the reason why they're in that position? So
Yeah. Yeah.
he has to get some consideration, but I'd be very shocked if he's anywhere near the top though in the actual voting when that happens.
Yeah, so I guess speaking of Lamar, I guess should we? So that was my one of my wins. I was 2-1 on the weekend for week 16. You were, I believe, 1-2. Since we talked about
Yeah,
my win, do you want to talk about our wins first this week and change things up?
sure. Maybe they'll throw my luck in a different direction if we
Yeah,
change that. Maybe
throw
that's
mine in a different direction too. But we'll see.
I don't know. At this point, it doesn't matter. I think you've actually already completed the
Clinched.
victory for
Yes, I
the
have clinched.
for the season in our competition. But
Yes.
some of this is just about us competing ourselves, though, too, not necessarily against each other, though, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, let's see if we can
What was
let's mix it up.
your lock of the week that actually locked?
It's the one my functional lock was on the Monday night game. And I owe a big thanks to the New Orleans Saints for not scoring any points, which is always a nice thing for a team to do when you've taken the under in a game. When one team contributes literally nothing to the total score. So I had the under at 42 and a half. Uh, Green Bay did make it a little worrisome, I guess, by putting up 34 in the game. But yes, again, New Orleans contributed nothing, so 34 nothing keeps it 8.5 points under. So easy, sort of easy win, I guess there for me. Unfortunately, my other games didn't have the
Yeah.
same E to them anyway.
I had a similar experience with my second win. I was also an under 42 and a half better. This was the Giants at Atlanta game featuring Drew Lock versus Michael Penix Jr. And that game ended up being 34. Also, the winning team had 34. Atlanta had 34 to the Giants 7, which was 41 total. So just squeezed in at under the 42 and a half. But 14 of those points were defensive touchdowns scored on pick sixes by the Falcons against the Giants. So it was going. I was more right maybe than the luck indicated because I was even able to survive two defensive touchdowns to keep it on the under side. Because I think usually when bettors bet under or over, we don't think of defensive touchdowns. We don't enter those into the equation because there's so few and far between, and it's not something that you can rely on in games. I guess counts the same score, but you think, okay, this game. I was thinking this game's going to be something like 20 to 10 or something like that, so it's going to stay under. And it was uh, but those two touchdowns by the Falcons on the interception returns made me sweat, but I still stayed under on that game because the Giants are so bad, and they did score 7, but they that's that's all they could muster.
Few quick notes on that game though, because you had the under in that one. The first possession of the game did end in a missed field goal, which would have, if you just added that to the point total, would have been enough
Yeah.
there. But and the other thing is, the Giants had a touchdown nullified just outside the 2 minute warning, and they
Ooh,
had and they which ended up being from like a first and goal from the 5 outside the 2 minute warning, and they had like 7 more plays and were unable to get any points out of that, and they ended up turning it over on downs. So
I
that's
wasn't even
pretty
supposed to.
fortunate to like be in that scenario and still
Yeah, I didn't pay
come
that much
ahead. So
attention to the game
that
itself. I just kind of followed the box score. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I was very fortunate there. That's the fine line between the 1 and 2 and the 2 and 1. So
exactly.
yeah, so I
The
got
betting luck gods are in your favor right now. That's
even though
what I say.
they were and they weren't because of those defensive touchdowns. So
Yes,
it evened out in the end, at least you could
they
say.
giveth and they taketh, but this
Yeah,
time they gaveth a bit more, I guess,
yes, yes.
in your
Uh,
favor.
So where were you a victim in any of your losses to bad luck, or were your two misses more just that you were just didn't see the game in the right way?
One was not terribly close, I guess, was the Minnesota Seattle game. I had the under there. I thought it was going to be a much more defensive type game, 43 and a half points. Ended up being over enough anyway. So it was Minnesota ended up winning 27-24.
Yeah,
Uh, where the first quarter was low scoring. It was only 7-0 after the first quarter, so which sounds all right. But then yeah, it ended up being uh 24 points in the second quarter. That's not so great. And then
uh,
yeah, then it was just enough of a trickle after that to trip the over. But
yeah.
I'm
Unders
pretty
on
surprised that that game was over by that much, at least. Anyway, that's
yeah,
51 points. That's a
51.
full touchdown over.
Yeah, unders on the weekend itself were bad. If I went all unders, I was only 6 out of 16, so it was 10-6 for the overs, and it's kind of telling that two of our bets we had three unders, and we got for our locks we ended up picking three unders together, I believe, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and we got
Yeah.
2 out of 3 of
Good.
those under, so we did
Yeah.
well when we were extra confident about the under, but not as well blanket on the blanket under. So
Yes.
yeah, so
Which is
it just
a bit of a gamble, but it's not
yeah.
not crazy.
Um, Speaking of my misread of the week, that was the Pittsburgh Baltimore game. I thought, this maybe is the time not of Pittsburgh keeping it close to Baltimore, but it's the time of the annual Pittsburgh kind of end of the season swoon, where they start out really hot, but then they kind of once you get into December, I think I read 5 out of the last 7 years, the Steelers have lost 3 games after Thanksgiving, each season in the season. So,
It's not
and
great.
yeah, so they've lost 3 in a well, previewing to the Chiefs, they've lost 3 in a row now. But they lost to Baltimore. They were in that game against Baltimore, but Baltimore also had like a pick six towards the end of the game that sealed their victory. Pittsburgh ended up losing 34-17. So that kind of swung things. Maybe if Pittsburgh had scored on that one, it would be 27-24. And then they would have stayed within, but you can't really. It was mostly a Baltimore win. That game, it was at Baltimore. Lamar Jackson had a good game, um, and yeah, Pittsburgh couldn't keep it that close. So it's one of those divisional games. You never know what quite is going to happen. So I assumed that Pittsburgh could keep it close because Pittsburgh usually has Baltimore's number, but in this game they um, couldn't do that.
What
How
was the
about your
final on?
final
What was the final on that one?
34-17?
Yeah. There were a couple 34, several like
And how
several
many,
34-point games, I guess, right? Teams scoring exactly 34 points.
yeah, 34-17 also that defensive touchdown tripped the over when I had the under on that one. So it would have had they not had that touchdown, that would have been 7 points fewer. It was over under 44 and a half. So take away those seven, it would have been um, 27-17, 44 points. So that would have been under rather than over. So that I could still blame the defensive touchdown as the cause of my missing on the over under as well. But yeah, there are a lot of
I
high
just thought it was
scores.
interesting that there were quite a few teams that scored exactly 34 points, though, which is a little strange.
Yeah,
The
Denver
Charger,
or Chargers scored
Chargers,
34.
Atlanta scored exactly 34 points.
I guess that's
There one.
3. We didn't have any
Green,
20-17 games like we were thinking.
no, Green Bay was 34 points also. So I think it was
That's
five
right.
teams at exactly 34 points, which seems like a little strange.
Yeah, Detroit. Yeah, yeah. So 5. You're right.
Yeah.
4 home teams, 1 road team.
And two were exactly 34-17 because the Detroit uh Chicago game was 34-17 also.
And there were 3 teams with more than 34 points, which is a lot of points. 2 36 and 1 38. So
Yeah. It was ended up being a high scoring week for
yeah, one we
some
have
teams, a lot of games anyway, I guess. So
yeah,
yeah,
we had
not
a
like
couple
as you mentioned, not a great week for the under betters, but
no.
yeah. Um, my final pick of the week that was also not so great was in the Tampa Bay Dallas game. I had Tampa Bay as a 3.5 point favorite. I expected them to win. I thought they would cover the spread. They ended up playing the whole game from behind, and Dallas ended up winning a close one. It was 26-24.
Yeah.
And Tampa had a few drives that like stalled out around midfield or so. So they were in it. They probably could have won that game, but they did not win and they did not cover the spread. So again, I ended up 1-2 for the week, which is like 4 weeks in a row at 1-2. Uh, not or 5 weeks in a row at 1-2. So not a great stretch for me. And I'm now 6 weeks in a row with a losing record, Mike. My season has really gone poorly for quite a while now. What what's happening? How am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Tell
What
me
are you
what I'm
doing
doing wrong
wrong?
so I can fix it.
Hard to say. I've been there. It's one of those things where you're just the games are unpredictable. Even when I think there's always the house always has the advantage. Um, so yeah, it's tough. It's tough to you're always going a little bit uphill in these games, and it's tough to even out. So I think it's just luck. In some ways it's just luck. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you could say maybe are you thinking like you're looking at how teams performed last week and thinking they're going to carry it over the next week. I think that sometimes is a good strategy. I think maybe as much it's not a good strategy as much as it is one, especially if it's a team that's not that great. This is one of the things if a team you think a team needs a win here, usually that means that they haven't been as good and they probably aren't that good. And so if they need a win, they probably won't get the win because they aren't that you know good teams don't need to win. They don't really have a lot of must-win games, at least not in the regular season.
Yeah,
Um, like the Chiefs, they didn't really have any must-win games this year. Even against Buffalo, it didn't matter that they lost to Buffalo because they won all their other games.
yeah.
So
And they do have a tendency to not really seem like they want to show teams that they're afraid that they might meet in the playoffs.
mm,
They don't want to show them anything they might want to use in the playoff game. So they don't necessarily play the same game they would play in a regular season as they would,
yeah,
if it was a playoff scenario.
yeah, they like to keep things in reserve. Where like I think teams like Baltimore don't, and you think, oh, they're really, really good, but they've lost 5 games this year. They lost to the
Yeah,
Raiders this year, so like it's yeah, it's hard to predict. Even good teams will lose to teams that aren't as good, and so I didn't think any of your bets were and the over under you bet you had this week was an over week and you had 2 unders. You got
yeah.
one of them, but but
No.
I so what is your record now in the season?
I'm at 21, 25, and 2 at $400 in the hole. You've improved now with your 2 in 1 week. You're at 29 and 19 on the season now, up $1,000.
$1,000.
I
Yeah.
think that's the first time either of us have gotten plus 10 at any point in a season. So that's very impressive, Mike. Nice job.
Thanks. Yeah, part of it was I picked the right time to bet on like the Chiefs. That turned out to be a horrible opening line for Vegas to put down
Right.
because I think even if the Chiefs had played Wentz, that wasn't a bad that maybe would have been it wasn't like they were automatically going to play Wentz, and there was still
No.
some question. Uh, and I think that is more of an automatic Wentz line. And even I would say I might have thought of betting it even if Wentz had played that game because I don't think Houston this year somehow it doesn't have the magic they did last year.
Right.
Part of it, Stroud maybe has regressed. Part of it, the receipt, Nico Collins has been hurt. Stephon Diggs is out. And now, as we saw,
He's been
Tank
both
Dell
yeah.
had a pretty bad injury against the Chiefs in the end zone where he dislocated his knee and tore his ACL and all of the other joints in his all the other ligaments in his knee. It seems
Yeah.
like so. Um, they've well the
And
Chiefs.
that game really did kind of turn on that play too, because that would what went from a celebration to kind of a disaster in the same
Mhm.
like just in the time between the catch and going to the ground.
But it
He,
also it also seemed like maybe Stroud was like distraught, which is maybe a little bit you don't want your quarterback to react quite that way, I think. You
yeah,
want the quarterback to be concerned about his teammate and maybe privately feel that way, but I think publicly you want to put on a braver face because you're, the leader of men out there. As much as maybe we think these games are played by numbers and things like that, there is a lot of the human element to it, and maybe not because it wasn't the same. Like it was a very kind of bad injury, but it was a knee injury. It wasn't like a neck injury or something like that where you think, well, we're fearful this guy, might not walk anymore or something like that. Or it's not DeMar
It's not the Damar
Hamlin.
Hamlin. So it's
Yeah.
hard not to go to that immediately.
So
Think of it.
this was just a bad knee injury. It was a really maybe it wasn't even it was yeah, so it's like it's really sad for him, but it's like it's not much different than the Rashee Rice injury. Uh, it's not that much different from even the Stephon Diggs injury earlier for the
No.
Texans. Um, so it's terrible for Tank Dell, who's had bad injury luck this season and last season. But
Yeah.
I was a little bit surprised how emotional Stroud looked during that game. Not to say that I wouldn't be, but like I'm not a multi-million dollar franchise NFL quarterback either. So
It's a lot easier to talk about it from this perspective,
yeah, yeah.
than it is from there. So it's yeah, but I mean, it was clear that the play of the team changed
Hmm.
after that moment in the game. So
Yeah.
that was, I
And
mean,
so, and sometimes teams like
it was
rally around
noticeable.
their players that afterward, and this was one where I don't think that quite happened.
Maybe it was a little deflating, I guess,
Yeah,
is what it appeared to be, at least from,
yeah.
the viewer perspective.
And you wonder if that was because of the way maybe the way Stroud react. Maybe it was just personally, it was deflated to Stroud because he was so upset and he wasn't playing quite as, well as before. But he hasn't been quite the same quarterback this year as he was last year. So I think, yeah, it's hard, back to our just betting strategy. It's hard to predict one week to the next, one year to the next. And I've been fortunate so far this year that I've been on the right side more than the wrong side. But when we've been betting on the games as a whole, going to the big board, we are both under. Uh, uh, we have both lost money on the year. I won a little bit more money this week, even with my bad over under bets. You had a troubling week, but again, you
Yeah.
know, I've had weeks that are that bad and worse this season, and it's like it's hard to win as much as you lose, I think. I don't think
Yeah.
you had like one really, really good where you won like $1,600, but or something like that.
And that was 3 weeks ago. And since then, the season's really turned
Yeah.
on me, I guess. So like it
Yeah, it's
seemed like I
easy
had
to
I
lose
had
that
like a
much
strategy
money.
that was working, and then all of a sudden it just has not worked at all since then. So and I
Yeah.
mean that happens though. That's part of the this is betting. This isn't a science.
Yeah,
Um,
and even if you get more right than you miss, you still don't always win money because of the way the lines are set and the amount you have to give up to win a certain amount of money. So yeah, it's
Perfect
very
example of this is on our big board right now, where like I won 9 of the 16 games on the money line, but ended up being $400 down in
yeah.
those, with a winning record, I guess, right? But it's because we were such heavy favorites that were winning, and none of my upset picks
No.
were successful at all. And so, like, the only wins I got were the games that, were like basically guarantees on the money line. So well, that's a good example of what you were just mentioning.
Yes. So I happened to have two I had happened to have a couple of upset wins on
And you killed it on the money line.
money line.
14 of
Yeah,
16 picks, Mike.
16. Yeah.
Not
But then
bad.
on the same week at the over under I was almost that's $450 under. So that basically sapped all of my most of my winnings. And so I ended up winning about $240 on the week. Uh, so I'm about $600 under for the season. A little bit, maybe $570 under for the season. You because you almost lost $1,000 this week. You're down to about $1,250 under the season. So I've passed you, but we're still both under,
Yeah.
and likely it's going to be tough for either of us, I think, to make it to claw our way back to even money this season. But you won money last season on the volume bet, so just because it
Yeah,
and we would probably say we think maybe since we've been betting for a couple of years now, we know more than we did last year.
yeah.
We're still not necessarily doing better than we did last year.
But what's worrisome is we're getting into this more unpredictable part of the season where some of like the teams are going to start resting players, so like the outcomes are going to be more mushy as to
Yeah.
what's actually going to happen, and weather starts having an effect on games too. So uh, this usually the last couple weeks of the season are a bit iffier.
Yeah.
So
Well, speaking of iffy in the last couple of weeks of the season. We want to move on to the college football playoff, uh, where we had the quarter where we had the round of 12 was played. We had four games going on, and those games were all played at the home stadiums of the or higher seeded team, ordinally higher seeded team. Um,
yes,
and you had much better luck with the college football playoffs than I did. Uh, all four games were, none of the four games were particularly close. All four home teams won. Notre Dame won by 10. Penn State won by, was it 28? And Texas won by 14. And
14.
and Ohio State won by, I think, 25. So all of the favorites, which none of the favorites had spreads less than 7.5 points. All of them won and covered. So is
And
this
most of them were not very close even. So
so
yeah,
you were 4-0 on that. I was only 1-3. I only got the Ohio State one. I if we had bet the money line, I would have been 4-0. But
right.
and so would you. But yeah, but
Yeah.
so I thought maybe some of the games were going to be a little bit closer than they were. Um, both of our teams that we predicted to win it all, though, are still in it because Georgia didn't play, but also Ohio State won comfortably over Tennessee, which is what the one game that I predicted correctly. So, if you were is the college football playoff? Is it? Are there too many teams in the college football playoff? Is that what's been revealed, or is this just four games that we can't really read a whole lot into because it's a small sample size?
Yeah, so I mean, that is what you would assume is that there probably are too many teams, that there's maybe 8 teams that can win it, but probably not 12. And these 4 teams that were the last four in are the ones that were quickly eliminated and summarily dismissed, I suppose, right? So, um, I think it's probably better to have more teams in it, though. Like, I mean, I guess we'll find out how this is going to work out, right? Because I think a lot of the expectation is that having that week off may actually be bad for teams. It seems like most of the teams that had buys didn't have very good odds at winning the whole thing. So, maybe playing this game, even if it is against weaker opponents, actually is more preparation for those teams to then go on and, defeat
Yeah.
the teams that got buys. So maybe there aren't 12 teams that can win, but maybe those other 4 teams may actually help for those teams advance them too by having just playing them. So I don't know. Do you think this is going to stay at 12 for very long, or do you think it's going to go like straight to 16 right away?
I
I
think
think
it
there
should go
already
to
is a plan, actually.
16. I think it'll stay at 12 for at least a couple more years. I don't think they'll automatically go to 16. But I think 16 is probably I think in some ways it's a disadvantage if you're a really high seeded team because you don't get an extra home game. You want that extra home game to get more money for your team,
Yes.
and you get an extra game for your fans, and it's fun to play at your stadium, and you don't have to go anywhere. If you're one of the and for those other four teams that are in it, those are teams that wouldn't be in it otherwise, so they're happy to be there. So
Right.
I I think it's a little strange that we have neutral sites after we have home. In some ways, it should be the first round should be neutral sites, and then starting later, they should be home games to give really advantages to the higher seeded teams if they want to do it. I know they want to keep the bowls incorporated into it, but um, that's you know that's not usually I think the way to go about if you really want to give the higher seed to teams the advantage. But
It probably doesn't play into the timing of the schedule either, because yeah, if you did the bowl games either earlier, then it takes away like the importance of the bowl,
yeah,
and then to have a home game for a team later, uh, or you're not starting these playoffs until New Year's, which means they're going to run into deep into the NFL playoffs where you don't really want to compete with
no,
the NFL
yeah, and
as your opposition on television, because that's going to minimize the dollar payouts that these bowls are able to pay to everything, because the TV deals won't be quite as good. So
yeah, the opening round of this game was up against NFL because the NFL starts playing games on Saturdays
yeah,
when college football regular college football season's over, and maybe they shouldn't have scheduled those games on Saturday. Um, they had I think one Notre Dame Indiana on Friday, and then the other three were on the Saturday. So maybe
which
play
were
those games.
against like huge games like
Yeah.
Kansas City and Houston, and then Baltimore and Pittsburgh were up
Mhm.
against these college games, which most of the football watching fan bases are going to be watching the NFL
Yeah.
if it's on. So it doesn't matter unless it's their college that they directly follow. Probably
Yeah.
going to be watching the NFL games, which has to cut into ratings. Which
Yeah. So you have to wonder what they're gonna do. Maybe they could spread out those games to maybe when maybe I don't know because Thursday's NFL night too. So you can't play all four if you want to play them all individually,
yeah,
like to not have other games compete.
not
Maybe
overlapping
not
time
overlapping.
frames.
Yeah. Maybe you
Yeah,
have two games on Friday, and I don't know. It's hard. It would be hard to do. You have to play those games like on Tuesday, Wednesday, which is what
which
they're
they
doing
completely avoid. Yeah,
next week. And they could have done Tuesday, Wednesday because it would have been because most of these students they aren't in classes anymore, so it's not like they're going to miss
yeah,
school. They've had their finals, and they're probably not taking the most rigorous classes anyway. Most of them, especially
probably
uh,
not.
so they're. I think maybe they should have been on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then the next following, 'cause, because that's what because that would have been, I guess um, if they had been Tuesday, Wednesday of last. Anyway, I don't know what I was going to try to say.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little confused on the timeline where we are and when those games were played and how
Yes.
that all
With the
enters in
holidays falling right in the middle of the week,
because Christmas,
it
yeah,
throws
and
everything
New
off. Like
Year's
I barely know what day it is. This does not. Like, we're recording this now on a Friday,
Friday
but it feels
next,
like it's not a Friday because it's just the second day of this sort of hybrid week after
yeah.
Christmas. So this is
Yeah.
very strange. This feels weird.
Yeah. Next week, it seems like they're doing it the right way, because they're playing on Tuesday, Wednesday, which is New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, which also coincides with
Yes.
when those bowls usually were. So they're not going to run into any NFL games like the NFL, played on Christmas. We'll talk about the Christmas Day games uh, just in a couple minutes. But you want to talk about so the next four, the quarterfinal round. We have four games. Uh, Boise State, which was I believe, number three seed, will play Penn State, who beat SMU. Boise State is 10.5 point underdogs. Uh, what do you think is going to happen in that game, Dr. Scaff? Do you think Boise State will cover? Boise State played very close against the University of Oregon, and I think at Oregon. Uh, this season, so that was their only loss.
Mm.
Uh, do you think, and Boise State, of course, has a dynamic running back Ashton Jeanty. I didn't follow his I've been following the quarterback, the college football, Genty, that's what it is, in between. Ashton Genty, um, who ran for as many yards as Barry Sanders basically did his Heisman Trophy year. So do you think Penn State will hold off Drew Aller and the um, Penn State Nittany Lions will hold off Boise State, or will Boise State keep it close or even win?
So I think I'm going to approach this week as similarly to what I approached the last week with, which was I don't really want to know anything about these teams. I don't really need to like look at this. I happened to just win all of my bets last week, Mike. So I'm going to stick with the same strategy and just sort of pick them blindly, but heavily go on the side of the favorites. So last week I took your most recent alma mater with a pretty sizable spread as a favorite. I'm going to do that again this week. So yeah, I'm going to take Penn State at minus 10.5.
I
And they're not
would,
playing on that garbage blue field, Boise State. So I think that's also an advantage for
yeah, I
Penn
don't
State.
want to play on the Smurf turf either. I want Penn State to win. It's 10.5 points. That's a lot. I think Penn State's going to win, but I don't. Penn State usually last week aside, Penn State doesn't usually blow teams out that are good. They win a lot of games against good teams, but they don't usually blow teams out. So I'll say Penn State. They might win by a touchdown over Boise State. I think Boise State, you know, the last time Boise State was in a really, really big game, or one of the last times Boise State was in a really, really big game, was that game against Oklahoma, where I think the Fiesta Bowl about, probably was that 15 years ago now, 20 years ago now, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it probably is.
See how old we are. Um,
All the years just run together, Mike. I don't know
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah. So I
Where
think
am
Penn
I?
State's, yeah, yeah.
We
I
already
don't,
talked about not knowing what day of the week it is. I guess we're
yeah.
we're showing our age this week.
Yeah, I think it was the Fiesta Bowl that Boise State won against Oklahoma. It was at the Fiesta Bowl. They're playing in the Fiesta Bowl this time. Um, that was 2007 Fiesta Bowl. 2007.
So it's
So it
more
was
more than 15 years
so it was
ago.
15. We said 15, maybe 20. So it was right in the middle.
Yeah,
We were
in the
right.
range. It's in the range.
Yeah. It happened January 1st, 2007. So
Hmm.
uh
So it'll be 18 years ago.
18. Yeah. So
Yeah.
still right in the middle. Uh
As of today, it's 17 years. Well,
17.
when they play the game, it'll be 18
So yeah, we're right between 15 and 20.
years.
So I think Penn State will win, but I'm gonna I think money line Penn State, but I would do spread Boise State or Boise State, as many
Yes.
people
See.
in Idaho say. They don't say Boise, they say Boise.
Well, we don't care. We're not there, so we're gonna say it how we say it, and they can try to correct us, but also we don't care. Does
Yeah.
that sound right?
Yes. Uh, yeah. If you look at the Wikipedia page of Boise, the first pronunciation is Boise, also Boise,
Hmm.
Boise.
I'm gonna go with the also. I'm gonna continue saying it that way. I've always said it.
Yeah,
I'll continue to use it. It's
I'm a little
fine.
surprised that they haven't kind of tried to drum in the Boise State pronunciation the way they've drummed up the Gonzaga pronunciation for another team up in the Pacific Northwest small school that is very strong. Like you don't see anybody say Gonzaga anymore because they
Hmm.
always say Gonzaga. Like, Jim Nance
Gonzaga.
will
Overdo it
punch you in
even.
the face if you say Gonzaga.
But
Um,
I think most of us have gone with the more Louisville pronunciation over Louisville, which is
Louisville.
how I always grew up saying it anyway. But
I
now
think I
I
say
now I
Louisville.
always say it more like Louisville,
Louisville.
Louisville. I just gotta
L,
swallow the words
like,
as you're trying to speak them at the same time.
like you have marbles in your mouth and you can't quite.
Yes, yeah. Like the word is trying to come out, but then you're also trying to swallow it down.
Louisville. Lulvul. Is that how you would spell that?
Closer to that,
Louisville,
yes.
Louisville,
Yeah.
or is it
But
Lu?
we have adopted that, more what we're told is the traditional pronunciation.
Yeah. maybe.
I'm gonna refuse on Boise. That's too far.
Okay, well,
It's
Boise
a bridge too
is
far.
so we both well, I picked Boise State and you picked Penn State on the spread there.
Yes.
We also have Arizona State, the other I guess the Big 12's representative in the tournament against former Big 12 team Texas. Arizona State is the largest underdog of the week, 13 and a half point underdogs against Texas. I think they're going to play that game at the Peach Bowl, or at least in the Atlanta Stadium that hosts the Peach Bowl now.
Yes.
Do you like Arizona State to cover against Texas, or do you like Texas to win by 2 touchdowns or more?
This one's the spread's a little bit further than what I like for this one. So this is gonna be the time I'm gonna actually break my trend, and I'm gonna take the underdog here to cover. I do think Texas will likely win, but I think the game will be relatively close. Arizona State did play really well. This is the one team I actually watched a little bit because they did beat my team, Iowa State, in the Big 12 championship, and they played really well in that game. So uh, and I've seen a little bit of Texas this year. I think one of the things that you like to say, you may as well just go ahead and say it, so I don't have to repeat something that you haven't said yet, but I haven't said in the past anyway about their quarterback situation.
Yeah, we think Texas doesn't play their best quarterback, and I think both of us would like to see Texas lose, um, maybe because
Yeah,
of their exit from the Big 12. And
they get nothing. They will never get my sympathy.
yeah, and so I like Arizona State as underdogs. I think they the Big 12 is a good conference. It's better than the ACC, and Texas only. I think Arizona State's a better team than Clemson, and Clemson kept Texas within 2 touchdowns. I think Arizona State will do the same. I think they're a little better. They've won like 10 games in a row or something like that. They
Yeah,
Cam Scatabo, their great running back, has been excellent uh, for them. So yeah, I don't think Arizona State's going to win. I still would put Texas on the money line because I'm not crazy, but I think
no,
Arizona State could keep it easily keep it a close game. So, and Arizona, I don't think Arizona State's going to be, scared, overwhelmed to be there because they've already played big games in big conferences, and
yeah,
so yeah,
and they've played teams that are accustomed to playing Texas too
yeah,
in the Big 12. So
yeah,
although
so
they wouldn't have been in the conference at the same time, though, so they
yeah,
would not have matched up in recent years.
yeah. So I like Arizona State plus 13 and a half, just like you. Um, the third game is maybe one of the most interesting because I think it pits maybe two of the top 3 to 4 teams when it comes to the betting world. It has Ohio State against Oregon. Um, Oregon was the number 1 seed overall, but they end up probably playing, one of the best teams that was not one of the top 4 seeds in Ohio State. Ohio State lost their was lost 2 games, one to Oregon earlier in the season, very very close game at Oregon, and then one to Michigan. That was a rivalry game, so that's why Ohio State got bumped down. But Ohio State's actually favored over the number 1 team Oregon by 2.5. And this game is going to be played in the Rose Bowl, which is a place where traditionally Ohio State would play Oregon, the Big Ten winner versus a Pac uh, 12, I guess, winner, Pac-10 winner. Uh,
Back to
yeah,
whatever,
Pac-2,
whatever
yeah,
it is.
whatever it is now. So yeah, do you like Ohio State or Oregon to win this one? I think you probably know what I'm going to pick since I picked Oregon. I picked Ohio State to win the whole thing. So I'm picking Ohio State as 2.5 point favorites to cover as well. I don't think it'll be a 1 to 2 point win for Ohio State. I think they'll win by at least a field goal. So what do you think, Dr. Scaff?
Yeah, it is interesting to see that Oregon did get the 1 seed, but it's only one game into this playoff, and Oregon has already given up the betting favorite to their first opponent in this tournament. So it's hard not to go with Ohio State in the scenario because just because of what it's looking like, how it's set up, at least on the betting front. I don't really know many of the teams. I didn't watch any of their games all season, Mike. So based on just what I see and the numbers, especially on the betting front, I'm going to the Ohio State, joining you, I believe, from since they are your pick to win the whole thing. It's hard not to go with them. Also, I'm guessing that you are not flipping at this point in the season.
No, I'm going with Ohio State,
Yeah,
2.5, -2.5 over Oregon. The next game I think is interesting too because it also features one of our teams that we think we're going to win it all. Georgia against Notre Dame. Georgia is only 1.5 point favorites, however, against Notre Dame. Uh, Georgia is the 2 seed. I think Notre Dame was the 7 seed. Um, Notre Dame has only lost one game all year. Georgia's lost 2 games this season. Georgia also has lost their starting quarterback, Carson Beck, and now is playing Gunnar Stockton as the
Stockton.
starting
You're
quarterback.
Stockton.
Gunnar Stockton. Do you think Gunnar and the Bulldogs will knock off the Fighting Irish? They're 1.5 point favorites. Are you still a believer in Georgia?
So on the betting side, their odds for winning the championship have slightly improved from where they were a week ago or during our last episode. They were plus 500 then, now they're plus 480. So the betters and the Vegas odds don't seem to have shifted away from them, even now knowing that their quarterback is out. I'm sticking with Georgia. They were my pick to win the national championship. I'm going to stick with them here in this game, especially since the line's only 1.5 points. So I'm gonna stick with Georgia. How about
Yeah,
you?
I'm going with Georgia too. Notre Dame, especially against SEC competition and in those big BCF, the former, the playoff, the college football playoff and things like that. Georgia has not, I mean, Notre Dame has not usually risen to the challenge. Usually they get defeated rather handily. Even with Georgia's starting quarterback out, I still think Georgia will win this game uh, rather easily. I still can't quite shake that Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois earlier in the season. So like they haven't played the best teams all year.
Yeah,
They lost one game and that was to a team that was not maybe a good team, but was not a powerhouse major conference team. So I think they're going to have a tough time with Georgia. So I think Georgia will win. I don't know. That might be the game I wouldn't be surprised if that was the game that was the least close of the whole of the 4 games.
it's the closest of the betting line, so that's actually a pretty bold statement there, Mike.
Well, I'm nothing if not bold. Uh, but if you're talking about the championship odds. Right now, Notre Dame is plus 700. Boise State is now plus 8,500. They've actually lowered their odds. I think they're plus 6,000,
Yeah, I think
wasn't it?
6,000. Yeah, that sounds right.
And Arizona State's now plus 6,500. They were plus 6,000, so it's
Getting a
higher
little
odds for those two
worse.
teams.
Yeah.
Texas is leading right now with plus 310. Ohio State plus 330. Oregon and Georgia are both plus 480. Penn State plus 500, which I think is interesting. But I still don't quite understand why Texas is number one. I don't
I
see
don't get
them
that either. Yeah.
as the best. Again, we've talked about they don't have the best quarterback playing. So, uh, and they've lost 2 games already this year and they lost to Georgia twice. They lost to Georgia twice. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, it must be just something about like their opponent versus, Oregon has to play Ohio State. So that's,
yeah.
maybe they're saying that game is more of a coin toss
So I guess that would
than
mean
maybe
that
we
they
think it
think,
is. But if you're trying to win a championship and you have to get through one game that's really tough, maybe that's makes their route a little harder. So their odds of, you know,
yeah,
have gotten a little worse. And Texas has maybe an easier opponent or what they think is an easier opponent. But I think we both think maybe they're maybe the most vulnerable actually of the teams that are there. So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
what do we know?
What do we know? Um, I think we know the NFL a little maybe better than college football now. So we want to switch to week 17 of
We especially know more about the NFL games that have already happened as
week
opposed to
17.
the games that haven't happened yet. So
And our bets on the big board have actually been very good at those. It's been the teams that we thought would win have won those games, and in the the unders have mostly come through as well, which I think was good for me. And the under on Thursday especially came through when the Seahawks defeated the Bears 6-3. Um, there was I think, as was pointed out by
Thankfully,
Al
we both
Michaels,
had the under in that one.
yeah, as Al Michaels pointed out in that broadcast, the White Sox lost to the Mariners one game this season 6-3, and this was the same score as a baseball game earlier in the season.
Yes,
Um, but that was a horrible game to watch.
strange.
But the game I think we're most interested in was the Chiefs' 29-10 victory over the Steelers. This was probably, we kind of alluded to this. This is probably their best game they played all year. And so it was in Pittsburgh. The game wasn't particularly close. Pittsburgh could have maybe scored at the end. It was a little bit of controversy at the end, I think, with the runoff when they could have had a timeout maybe rather than running it off, but that could have tripped the over rather than keeping the under.
Which
Uh,
made me furious because I had the over in this game.
you wanted the garbage time touchdown.
I
Uh,
absolutely did. Well, I mean, it wasn't necessarily garbage time. Uh, when they basically seeded the previous possession, running it on like first and second down with like 6 minutes to go, when they basically had already given up. They were down by quite a bit, but usually teams don't quit that early in a game. It was very strange to see them actually do that, especially like a Mike Tomlin team. It's just really seems surprising to me. How
yeah,
they played like those last two possessions. Like they needed three scores and they had no urgency at all coming out with plenty of time to at least get, one and then think about the next two, but they didn't even cry for the first one. So the overbetters were furious with Pittsburgh, like myself. Well, the underbetters are cheering them giving up. So there you go. But the
yeah,
game itself went pretty similar to what we kind of expected, I guess. We both took the Chiefs to cover and win, and they did easily that. But they because we're recording our episode later than these games, we only have the big board. We didn't take any of these games that have already happened in our
no.
bets, our locks of the week.
Yeah, Baltimore had an maybe even easier time against Houston. They won that game, was it 34-2, 31-2,
I think, yeah, 31-2, I think.
31-2, which was not a scoregami. There had been two of those that happened previously.
Shocking.
The last one, 1965. But 31-2. So there was one safety that Houston mustered. So Houston, again, maybe since that Tank Dell injury has gotten even worse. So again, maybe that was what um, kind of signaled their downfall. Houston's already qualified for the playoffs. They already won for the division. So right now, it seems like Houston is going to be the number 4 seed no matter what. And maybe Pittsburgh is playing for number 5 seed because now Baltimore has taken over the division, which actually makes things really good for the Chiefs because the Chiefs will probably play the winner of Pittsburgh Baltimore, depending on what happens in these last couple of weeks. Whereas I think the Chiefs are a little bit more afraid of either the Broncos or the Chargers as potential opponents at home because now they won't have to play either Baltimore or Buffalo. Buffalo going to be 3-2 in some order, and probably Buffalo 2, Baltimore 3. But they'll have to play each other before, or one team's going to knock them off already. Um,
Yeah.
the earliest the Chiefs would have to play either of those teams would be the AFC Championship, which is now at Arrowhead because the Chiefs are 15-1. Uh, and they
Yes.
either be 16-1 or 15-2 coming after week 18. But they'll have the bye. They'll have Mahomes be able to get healthy. Chris Jones maybe can get healthy again. He's been out with the calf injury last. He was out with a calf injury last game. The defense played really well without Jones. They had 5 sacks. Um, I think that was maybe also very heartening that the defense played so well without their best player. Were
Yeah.
you, yeah. What'd you think of what'd you think of the defensive performance?
Yeah, they look pretty good. They're still forcing turnovers. They got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. I think what Felix Anadike Uzoma even had a sack, which I don't think we've really seen a whole lot from him. So that was a good sign that maybe there's still value there in that first round pick from. 2 seasons ago. Was that were you
Yeah,
encouraged by that?
he I was encouraged by that. Mike Dana had 2 sacks. I think Karlaftis had a couple. Um, so
Because yeah, Karlaftis has been a little quiet
yeah,
for a
he's
while
starting to heat
too.
it up.
So
I think just having him, and he didn't have any sacks, just kind of like Chris Jones has had a lot of, but they're guys that you have to pay attention to, and
yeah,
you can devote less attention to the other guys on the team. So yeah, the Chiefs are getting healthy at the right time, assuming Jones is going to be healthy coming back. But I think
yeah,
um, he'll be healthy by the time the playoff game the Chiefs have, which will be 3 weeks from now, basically.
yeah.
So. Um, and it'll be against, I think, a team that the Chiefs can kind of warm up and beat. At least, hopefully, they don't play it that way. They
Yeah,
play it tough. Um, but yeah, ideally it would be Pittsburgh at the 5, Houston at the 4, and then the Broncos, Chargers, or Bengals maybe if I think the Bengals are gonna come through because of the
be
Bengals if they
candidate.
beat Denver and Denver loses to Kansas City, the Bengals might be in the playoffs, and I think the Chiefs do not want to see the Bengals in the playoffs either. So the
Yeah,
Bengals are a 7 seed. They play Buffalo. That's a great you know
let them beat each other up, and
yeah.
yeah, we'll likely see the other one in the AFC Championship game, I
Yeah,
suppose,
or let
or
Denver play
the next round.
Buffalo, or let the Chargers play. Those are or and Baltimore. So like, I think it seems like to me the bottom of the AFC teams, the teams that could win playoff games are Sandy, are the Los Angeles Chargers, are Denver Broncos, and maybe the Cincinnati Bengals if they make it. I don't
Yeah,
know if they'll make it. I don't think they will make it, but if they do, that'll be kind of scary. Um, I don't think the Steelers are going to win a playoff game unless it's against Houston.
yeah,
I don't think Houston's going to win a playoff game unless it's against Pittsburgh.
yeah.
So yeah,
Okay, because Pittsburgh's really fallen late in the season, like you mentioned earlier.
yeah. This is. I think it's right now. It's
Rough
the best
stretch.
the bracket could shape up for the Chiefs, being number 1 seed and just seeing all those other teams, especially the 2-3 matchup being the two teams that are most likely to challenge Kansas City. One of
Hmm.
them's already beaten Kansas City. One of them was very close to beating Kansas City this year. So
Lost by a toe, right?
yeah. Yeah. Or I guess
Yeah,
they lost potential tie by toe, but then
yeah,
or potential win, depending on what happened. But they would need a
right.
toe and a two to win. But
Yeah,
still it was very close.
yeah, yeah.
Um, since we've kind of I think we've talked about those games long enough, should we get into our bets of our locks of the week and then we'll wrap up this episode of the Morning Trip Power Hour
I
after our
think so.
locks?
Yeah.
This
So,
is a
and so far, it's been a lot of agreement on the big board, though. So that's not very exciting to look at for uh, when you're looking at like finding differences between what we how we think the week is going. It seems like we're in pretty good agreement so far.
Yeah, and we've already made the bets on the Saturday games, and those are pretty close as well. So just a little bit of a difference on the over-unders.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think either of us made bets on the Saturday games as part of our locks, however. Our locks will all be Sunday or
Yes.
Monday games. Um,
That's right.
do you want to go through your first lock of the week, Dr. Scaff? Let you
Sure.
start out?
Yeah, so I did change up my strategy a bit this week. I started looking at how teams did against the spread or against the over-unders on the season so far. So I'm looking more at from like a betting perspective, how teams have done. So I landed on three different types of bets in this one. I'm going to take one over, one under, and one spread for my picks this week. My first pick of the week is with two teams that have underperformed against the over. So I'm going to be taking the under in the Indianapolis and New York Giants game. Over under number is pretty low though, so I'm a little bit leery of that. But both teams have had trouble scoring this season, so I'm not terribly worried about it. So Indy at New York Giants under 40 and a half points. For my first
I'm
pick.
I'm going under as usual, so I like that bet. This is one of those games that's interesting because Indianapolis still has technically a shot at the playoffs if they win their last two games, but also they aren't going to score many points probably with Anthony Richardson as their quarterback right now. He's very raw still. He's not a good passer. Is this something where you would put Joe Flacco in instead of Anthony
Maybe
Richardson?
it'll worry some. Yeah.
And then maybe you would worry about the over under. I think if Flacco were playing, because he could complete some passes, and you have Jonathan Taylor running the ball and hopefully not dropping it before he gets to the end zone. Um,
Which seems like a
so
ridiculous problem to still be having
yeah,
as like in the sport at all, let alone at the NFL level, right?
yeah, yeah. So I like that bet. Yeah. So technically, Indianapolis, Miami, and the Bengals are still technically in the game. If one in the playoffs, if I think if either the Chargers lose out or the Broncos lose out, and one of those teams wins out, they still have a chance of making the playoffs. But I like that bet because it's an under, so of course I like it.
Yes.
But I think the Giants don't score many points. We did well. I did well with the Giants. As long as Indianapolis doesn't score a lot of defensive touchdowns, I think you've got a good shot. Against at home too. I think the Giants have even been worse at home than they have been on the road this year. So, and that's hard
Yeah.
to do. The Giants, I think, are playing in some ways for the number one pick overall. So, um,
I think they're in the driver's seat as of now, aren't they?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so you're picking that game. My first block of the week is an odd one because it's Minnesota at home against Green Bay. Minnesota is tied for the best record in the NFC, and if they win their last two games, they're going to be the number one seed in the NFC. The last two games are pretty tough divisional games. They're playing against the Packers at home, and then I think it's the Lions at home. I think they're both in Minnesota, but the Packers right now are 1.5 point favorites over uh, the Vikings as of Friday. So I don't know
Minnesota's
what's
at
going.
Detroit the last game.
Oh, it's at Detroit last night. It's going to be tougher than be at
Yeah.
Detroit, sure. Um, but I still think the Vikings are going to win this game. I think Green Bay is still a little bit up and down. They played really well against New Orleans, but that was at home, colder weather. New Orleans is a dome team. They're not, I think
They're
Minnesota,
pretty depleted too, so it's not, and they're
yeah,
not playing well this
yeah.
last several weeks.
Minnesota's won, I think, 8, 9, 10 in a row almost. So they're on a real hot streak. Um, they're eight in a row. I think they've won. They were 5-2. They were 5-0, then 5-2, and then now they're 13-2. Um,
Yep. You got it.
so I like Minnesota, especially if I'm getting plus points in Minnesota. I like Minnesota in that game. So plus 1.5 against. So if they lose by one or if it's a tie somehow, I will come out on top even if Minnesota doesn't win that one. So I like the points. Minnesota 1.5 plus 1.5 against Green Bay.
It does seem really strange with a team that's like in like the mix to be the number one seed in the NFC, isn't favored at home in a game against an NFC team. It's a little surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I read an article that sharp money though is on the side of Green Bay. At least it is for now. It might swing the other way quickly. So I also kind of want to make that bet right now because I think it might go the other way. Um, so it's a little bit like the Chiefs. I think I'm getting a good number for like the Chiefs Texans. They're a home underdog when I don't think they should be a home underdog. So I'm going with Minnesota as the current home underdog against Green Bay. I think Jordan Love's still a little bit spotty. He throws interceptions sometimes. Uh, it seems like Darnold's actually been more reliable this year. And so yeah, I like the Vikings to cover and probably win.
And stay in the mix then for that one seed
Yeah, stay in the
with
mix.
their showdown with Detroit coming up for the last week of the season. That should set up a pretty nice storyline at least.
It should. Yes. And Sam Darnold, yeah, this season he has 32 touchdown passes to 11 interceptions. And we have Jordan Love. Jordan Love has 24 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. So the same number of interceptions, but um, touchdown passes, it's been Darnold so far
Yeah.
this season. So, and I think just having Justin Jefferson and in indoors especially is a huge advantage. So, I I I like the chances for Minnesota.
Seems like a solid pick. And you've got a pretty good history, especially recently, of finding these gems, Mike. So
Yes,
uh,
and yeah, I guess Minnesota already won at Green Bay, so maybe you'll think they're going to win at home as well.
yeah, even more surprising than if they're an underdog at home. But yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
indeed. How about your second lock of the week, sir?
So my next pick, I did notice that there were two teams that are near the top of the charts in being able to hit overs this season are actually playing each other. So two teams in the top six. This is the Carolina and Tampa Bay. Over under the game's 47 and a half. I like this to be a relatively high scoring game. It seems like they both have decent offenses. Tampa Bay probably has a better offense by quite a bit actually, but Carolina's defense isn't terrible. And but both their defenses aren't so great. So I'm expecting this to be a little bit of a high scoring game. I'm guessing you're going to be picking against me at least on the big board, but maybe you can see where my argument is
I
here
can.
with
Yeah.
teams that have tended to hit overs this season.
Yeah, I think both of these teams are able to score 30 points or more in a game, and they could score 30 or more points against each other. So I could see that going
Yeah,
over. I'm going to pick it under just because I'm picking all the games under, but I could see that going over. If I had to pick a game over, that would be probably on the list if I had to pick one of these games um, over. But I'm still doing the under, but yeah, I can see where the over might be a good bet.
I'm trying to get you to break your trend and
Yeah.
come to the over side, Mike.
I know well, I know that picking I've been doing very well with my other bets when I pick the all under, even if those unders
Yeah,
aren't coming through. So I'm maybe I should just move away from over unders if I were making real bets and just bet on spread money line, and then I'd be
yeah.
doing uh
Just don't even consider them as bets. Why would you even
yeah,
worry about what's happening over there? Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense.
Um
How about your next pick?
Yeah, mine is an interesting one, I think, partly because I don't know quite what to expect because both teams are starting backup quarterbacks. This is Dallas at Philadelphia. It's another division game. Dallas is, of course, going with Cooper Rush, who's been pretty good the last few weeks, able to keep the team moving. Dallas is also going to be without CeeDee Lamb, however. I think he's injured and they're going to shut him down for the season. But Philadelphia is going to be without Jalen Hurts. They're going to start Kenny Pickett at quarterback, and I don't know how well Pickett will do. He'll turn the Steelers, as you talked about before that we went on the air, into more of a running team with Saquon. Um, and of course, the Cowboys are no strangers to facing Saquon Barkley, he was with the Giants before, and now he's with the Eagles, so he's not like a new guy to them.
Right.
So Dallas is actually 7.5 point underdogs at Philadelphia. I would think that's a good spread if Hurts was the quarterback, but with Pickett as the quarterback, I think it's a little much. So uh, I think Philadelphia still might win that game, but I think Dallas will keep it close. And even Dallas doesn't have a whole lot to play for. I think the players probably think it's a rivalry game. They want to beat the Eagles. So I like Dallas plus 7.5 against Philadelphia on the road.
Dallas is actually a little bit on a roll. Even like they're probably playing their best football of the season, having started out pretty terribly actually. But they have won four of their last five. Only loss came to the Bengals,
Mhm.
one score loss, which would
And that
which
was
would was inside the what the current spread is in this game.
and that was perhaps because of the blocked punt that they ended up touching
Yeah,
afterwards. So
that's
that
right.
was a freak
That's
uh,
right.
loss. So maybe even so. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it always seems to be fairly safe in thinking that if you take your a dynamic quarterback out and replace him with a less dynamic player, then the offense becomes more, as a whole becomes less dynamic then too. So that does seem to play into this game being at least closer than what this line is indicating to me. It seems like it's really surprising that it's that big of a spread to me. Also, were you surprised to see the spread that high, 7.5?
Yeah, I thought it might be four, something like that. So
Yeah. But
maybe
that really isn't the Mike Werman special though of the 7.5. So you only have to get within a touchdown is all.
within
So
one
that's
touchdown. Yeah.
yeah. If it
Yeah.
was
So
6.5, I bet you don't like it nearly as much.
no, I don't. I don't.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
even at just 7, you probably don't like it as much.
Not as much. You get the push as a possibility. Here we don't at least don't have to worry about a push.
So if it
So
was only 7, do you think this would be one of your locks this week? Maybe you'd still pick it on the big board, but uh, would it be one of your locks, you think, if it was just a half a point different?
I would hesitate for sure. I might have looked for
Yeah.
something, but even one half a point is something that am looking for. So I like, yeah, the plus 7.5 is in that sweet spot for me. So
So that's
uh,
even how narrow these the picks come down as to be.
yeah, you have to really find your line and stick to it. And
Yes. Yeah.
um, what was the line you found on your third log of the week, Dr. Scav?
It's one now that having just now talking about this last game that you're probably going to tell me that it's going to be not a very good pick because it's on the wrong side of this half point pick is in this Monday night game, which I've been picking uh, for several weeks now. I'm going to stick with that trend at least anyway. But I've got Detroit on the road at the now eliminated from the playoffs San Francisco 49ers. Detroit's favored by 3.5 points. I think they're still going to be playing for positioning, so they're going to need to win, want to win, but it's not like the desperation type win. This is, playing from out front.
Mhm.
I don't see San Francisco really caring how this goes anymore, so I can see them sort of shutting down a bit. They have not been playing that well anyway, so their reason for spoiling is probably not there, at least anyway. They're not the team that's been down on their luck for a long time. So I see Detroit winning this game probably by at least a touchdown or so. But Detroit minus 3.5 at San Francisco for my third pick.
Yeah, 3.5 is not as good as 2.5 or three, but I I do think there are yeah, like you said, Detroit is playing for the number one seed in the NFC, so they need to win out basically, and San Francisco doesn't have a whole lot to play for. This is also a rematch of the NFC Championship game of last year, where Detroit really had it in the bag until they had a couple of miscues and let the
That's right.
49ers get back into it in the second half. So I'm sure they are eager to avenge that loss too. So there's couple of storylines you can play up on the part of Detroit there. And you worry maybe about the weather in San Francisco. Is it going to be windy, cold, rainy? How do the Lions play in those kinds of conditions? But um, yeah, I would lean towards Detroit there as well if I had to go for a side. So even though it's 3.5, which isn't what I would like, I would maybe like to see what happens with that line if it goes somewhere. But I think like you said, I think the 49ers are maybe going to not they're not going to think they're going to roll over and play dead, but they're not maybe as juiced as they would normally be in that game.
Yes. How about your final pick of the week then, Mike?
Yeah, my final pick is another. Um, I have three divisional games, which is maybe not the thing to do in these late games in the season, but um, I have, and this is also a favorite. I have a home favorite, Buffalo over the New York Jets. Buffalo's favored by 8.5 points. I think Buffalo it wants to keep its hold on the two seed in the playoffs because I think they don't want to go to Baltimore to play again if they have to, because Baltimore, really took it to Buffalo in that game in Baltimore towards the beginning of the season, maybe week 4 or something like that. Um, I think they won like 35-10 over the Bills. So I think the Bills definitely want Baltimore to come to them. I think also there has been a narrowing in the MVP race. It seemed like it was Josh Allen's award to win for a couple of weeks, but now it seems like maybe it's Lamar Jackson again coming back. So I think I think they want Josh Allen to have a big game. It's also against the Jets, who are a hated rival. The Bills only beat the Jets, I think, by a field goal in New York, so maybe they want to, you know, trounce the Jets. Who knows what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. Uh, I don't. I like the Bills winning comfortably in this game, so I think they'll win by at least 10. 10 is more than 8.5, so I'll go with the Bills minus 8.5.
That's a much bigger spread than I'm used to seeing you pick as a lock, at least anyway. But I like your reasoning behind the Josh Allen going for an MVP. That's really pretty motivating, I think, for him and for the team to cover that. But that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, good. Are there any other games on the slate that you're looking forward to in
Well,
week
having already
17?
known about the Chiefs game, having already happened for us in our scheduling for this week, that would be our normal, most look forward to game. Uh, of the remaining games, though, it's not so pretty out there for the
Yeah,
matchups.
I think Denver Cincinnati maybe is the game we would say is most interesting to us.
Well, it's
It's
maybe most interesting, but I don't know that I want to watch it though. Like, there are
Yeah,
two teams that I don't like
don't like. Yeah,
playing each other. It's a tough one for me to want to watch. Like I want to know what the outcome is, but I don't necessarily want to actually watch either of these teams play, let alone
yeah.
against each other.
I guess Atlanta, Washington is two teams that are battling for the playoffs. I think it's also two first round quarterbacks, Michael Penix versus Jaden Daniels.
Yeah,
So that could be an interesting game. I still don't think Atlanta is that good.
yeah,
But it's at Washington. So I like Washington's only favored by 4.5. That's where I would have gone. I would have gone Washington minus 4.5 as my third bet if I didn't want to do the Dallas or the Buffalo game.
yeah.
Um, but
And like
I was thinking,
Miami Cleveland on paper seems like one that should have been an interesting game when they were scheduled this early in the before the season started, but it's turned out to be maybe not so
yeah.
interesting of a game now.
Which game is let's talk about the worst game of the week. I think there's two choices. Do we think the Vegas Raiders at the New Orleans Saints is worse, or is the game between Tennessee and Jacksonville worse? Is that which one would be the worst game of the week, do you think? Raiders,
Well, it's going to be the
Jaguars?
quarterback matchups. It's got to be the quarterback matchups. Tennessee, Jacksonville. Don't you think?
We have Mac Jones against Mason Rudolph. I think it is a dwarf Aiden O'Connell versus Spencer Rattler, or whoever Jake Haener, whoever I don't. Yeah, those are both really awful. I think I have more
Yeah.
of an active dislike for the Jaguars and Mac Jones and the way Tennessee has treated me this year. My bets, I've done terribly when I bet on Tennessee. Um, and so I'm not gonna. I think Tennessee will win probably because I think Mason Rudolph might be able to carry the team over Jacksonville, but I don't want to. I don't want to touch that with the 10 foot pole.
But
Really,
it's because it's Mac Jones
Mac
as the
Jones,
quarterback there, right? Not
Michael
Michael
McCorkle.
McCorkle Jones, as you like
Yes,
to say.
yes. So that's yeah. Those are the two games I'm least looking forward to. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Speaking of looking forward to something, we're looking forward to next week's episode of the One Track Power Hour, which will also be kind of at a weird time because of the holidays. We'll probably record that after the new year. And so we will wish you here at the One Trip Power. We couldn't wish you a Merry Christmas because we uh, ended up having our uh, broadcast after Christmas. But we wish you a
We're
great
delayed.
post-Christmas holiday and a happy New Year from all of us here at the One Track Power Hour. Should we wrap it up, Dr. Scaff?
I think so.
Well, as we mentioned, have a happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Post, happy. I guess it's even after St. Stephen's Day. We'll have to, which is the day after, or Boxing Day was
Boxing Day. We've missed Boxing Day
this
entirely.
Boxing Day. Um, there's the 31st is St. Sylvester's Day. I remember that. I think it's yeah, we might have Slaughter the Innocents Day. One of the Innocents Day, I think, is one of those uh Saints days. That's tomorrow. That's the 28th. This Saturday is the Feast of the Holy Innocents, where the babies supposedly were slaughtered
Hmm.
after the birth of Jesus uh, by the Mad King Herod, which is also the source of the very depressing but very beautiful Christmas carol, the Coventry Carol. Is that one of your favorites, Dr. Scaff? Do you know that
I
one?
can't place it right now, actually. So,
Well, you can play it after the
well, we'll have our have to post a full review of it in next week's episode.
yeah, the Coventry Carol. Yeah, there's a very good version done by I think the uh, choir of one of these English boys choirs of like Westminster Abbey or
Hmm.
I mean Westminster Cathedral, the Catholic one. Um, but
I'm sure I'll recognize it when I hear it, but I don't know. We'll have to do
yeah,
like a full reaction video on our TikTok channel. Uh,
yeah.
yes,
Hopefully, our innocents won't be slaughtered in our uh, betting this
nice.
coming week. We'll see how we do on in week 17 with the remaining part of week 17 in the NFL, also college football, the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. And we'll be back next week to recap all of that. We'll also be back next week to preview week 18, the final week of the NFL season, where uh, things are a little bit weird because we have some teams jockeying for position, some teams already in position, some teams out of the playoffs, some teams trying to get into the playoffs. So you never know what's going to happen week 18. So it's not a good betting week usually, I think, for us. So it'll be more unpredictable even than normal.
Weather can be crazy too. Who knows?
Yeah, the
All
weather.
kinds of
Yeah.
things. We'll see
Um,
like maybe some rookies emerging. Could be lots of a lot more unpredictability for
backup
sure.
quarterbacks playing.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
fourth,
it'll be
fifth,
interesting.
sixth string quarterbacks maybe even. Who
Six-
knows?
Yeah, hopefully not. You'd be yeah. Although Cleveland almost had six quarterbacks last season play for them,
Right.
so um, yeah, but we will not play our backups or 16. We're the starters. We're gonna be there next week no matter what. You have that to look forward to. Another exciting week of hard-hitting and hair-splitting analysis is in the books, and we'll have one more next week to conclude the NFL regular season. And we hope that you join us. We thank you for joining us so far, whether it's you or listening to us on a podcast on one of our many delivery channels or watching our YouTube channel. We hope that you subscribe and keep listening or keep watching us. And as always, I am Dr. Michael Werman. He is Dr. Andrew Scaff. We are the Warning Trick Power. Please like and subscribe to our what I just said, our podcast or our YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you next week. We also hope that you have a good weekend this weekend watching football, making bets, as long as your interests do not conflict with ours. And having said that, we wish you a good day.